Thank you for joining us, Congressman. It's great to be with you.
Thank you, Hannah.
So let's start with the news of the day. Yesterday, you made a splash by calling on your fellow California Democrat, Senator Dianne Feinstein, to resign. You were the first House Democrat to do that and cited, quote, a crisis in the judiciary, in part as part of the reason. The senator has already said that she's not seeking re-election at the age of 89, and she has still 2 years to go left before her term is up. Why go the additional step to call for her resignation? What went into that thinking?
Well, my intent was not to make a splash. It was simply to say publicly what so many know privately, and that is, while Senator Feinstein has had an extraordinary, distinguished career, she's simply unable now to fulfill her duties. And it's sad to see. It's sad to see her in this state where she is missing votes, where we're not being able to confirm judges because of her absence on the Judiciary Committee. And I just think we should have someone in that role who can do the job right now.
Former Speaker Nancy Pelosi had also some thoughts of her own. Let me read you what she said. She made a bit of news in response to the resignation chatter. She didn't mention any names specifically, including not calling out your first call, but she did say, in quote, it's interesting to me. I don't know what political agendas are at work that are going after Senator Feinstein in that way. I've never seen them go after a man who was also sick in the Senate in that way. Your response?
Well, I don't know what political agendas are at work with her comments. I just know that there are so many people who are really concerned about women's rights, who are concerned about the Texas decision with the FDA. And what they want to know is, why can't we confirm these judges? I've had so many women leaders and leaders in the reproductive rights movement reach out to me and respond to my call, saying we need, at this historic moment, to have someone there to fill these judge positions. But I think this is one of the things that is wrong with our politics. Look, there have been people who have been friends, and I get it, and they've risen up to power for the last 40 years in the establishment. But what people in this country want are folks who are willing to tell the truth, to say the common sense, and not just put their loyalty to a political machine ahead of the American people or ahead of the agenda of women's rights.
Did her comment catch you off guard?
No. I mean, look, I have a lot of respect for Speaker Pelosi, but I understand the Burton Brown machine that has dominated California politics. I don't think that's the right way today. I think we need reform. I think we need new voices, and we need people who are really going to stand up for women's rights.
You notably turned down the opportunity to run for Feinstein's seat and endorsed fellow progressive Congresswoman Barbara Lee. That Democratic primary is shaping up to be a race among progressives and moderates to an extent, with Lee and Congresswoman also Katie Porter, a close ally of Senator Elizabeth Warren's, representing sort of the left wing of the party, and Congressman Adam Schiff on the more moderate side. There were concerns among some Democrats at the time that another progressive would fracture the vote for the left. Did that factor into your thinking?
Barbara Lee's candidacy factored into my thinking. She's a hero of mine. She's been an anti-war voice. She's my neighbor in California. And when she decided to run, of course that factored into my thinking. And I want to make sure that African-American women have representation.
Moving away from California, we're both pretty far from your home state, but also from Washington, D.C., where you're serving in your fourth term. In fact, we're sitting in a hotel lobby right now in Des Moines, Iowa, arguably one of the most consequential political states historically in every election cycle. So to just sort of address the elephant in the room, why are you here?
Well, we are focused on this DMAC Google program that is bringing technology jobs to rural communities. There was a wonderful piece in the Washington Post today by Jennifer Rubin that describes the program in detail. And what we're doing is helping create economic opportunities for people in rural American communities of color. I was in Allegheny, Pennsylvania, now here in Des Moines, going to Benedict, South Carolina. We've done this in New York and Mercy College. Students are getting a $5,000 stipend. They're getting an 18-month course, and they're going to get a $50,000 to $60,000 job after it, and some of them going all the way up to $100,000. This can transform rural America. It can transform factory towns by bringing economic opportunity. And we waited to see the program's success before coming here. I'm here because the first group of students is about to finish their 18-month program, and you're going to see a lot of success stories.
So focusing in on that economic pitch that you've been making, there's some prominent progressives and moderates as well have sort of said in the lead up to the midterms that Democrats specifically should focus on these types of economic messages more. I know you've been one of the leading voices, along with Senator Bernie Sanders, who's been calling on this also, to maybe focus more on this and not on sort of the social issues, or maybe not every social issue. There's certainly a debate within the party about what to emphasize. Economics, obviously, we see abortion being a huge concern. We see voting rights. How do you make that calculus? How do you decide what gets prioritized?
Well, we have to first stand on principle when there's an assault on women's rights, with the extremist judge in Texas taking away basically the abortion pill and having him overturned by the appeals court. We have to focus on voting rights when there's an assault on that. That's in part why I called on Senator Feinstein to step aside. If you care about voting rights, if you care about women's rights, we need to confirm judges. So that's a matter of first principles. And the Democratic Party has to speak loudly, boldly, clearly about that. And I speak about that whether I'm in Pennsylvania or Iowa. But we need to also have a message. In addition to that, we need to have a second sentence. And that second sentence has to be, what are we going to do for folks to bring economic opportunity? What are we going to do to bring manufacturing back? What are we going to do to bring the technology prosperity in my district to places that have been left behind? In my district, when there's a town hall, 80% of hands go up saying they're optimistic about America. That's not the case in many other communities. I believe if we bring economic opportunity, if we have a renewal of American production, if we make America manufacturing superpower again, which we can with technology, that we can start to bring this country together in ways that have fractured it. Does that mean that everyone is going to suddenly agree with me that the Texas judge is an extremist? Probably not. But if we can bring the country together on economic opportunity while standing for principle, that gives us the best shot to have a multiracial, multi-ethnic democracy with women's rights, with gay rights, with voting rights in the 21st century.
So I'm listening to that. I'm thinking of two different things. You're representing Silicon Valley, which to most people, including, probably many people here in Iowa, there's other rural parts of America. They hear Silicon Valley, they think big tech, they think Facebook, lots of money. They think of these sort of buzzwords affiliated with that region of California. And what you're talking about now is something more kind of almost a revival of bringing back these more industrialized parts of the Midwest. But there seems to be almost a disconnect between making that pitch cohesive. So coming from a tech-centric place, how do you kind of bridge that gap and make people trust what you're saying is relevant to their lives, but is also feasible and not, you're not going to steal everyone's data or whatever.
Right. Well, I introduced the Internet Bill of Rights, so I am at the forefront of protecting data. I have called for social media companies to have more regulation because we have 1/3 of American teenagers who are contemplating suicide, and there needs to be a standard where they're not harming young Americans. But I think when most Americans think of technology, they probably think of the Amazon packages at their door. They think of their phones. They think of FaceTime. They understand that technology has changed lives. And here's what they get. For us to bring manufacturing back, we're going to need technology. We're going to need the new innovation to make the steel in America again, to make aluminum again, to make paper again, to make textiles. And they understand that the technology is going to be key, not just to prosperity, but to many middle-class jobs, whether it's in manufacturing, whether it's in retail, whether it is in healthcare. One of the things that is a stereotype, in my view, against rural Americans is this view somehow that they don't understand what's happening in the world. They get it. They understand what's changing the economy. They understand we're in an economy where technology really matters. You know what they resent? That their kids don't have the opportunity that the kids in my district do. What they resent is that their communities don't have the economic prosperity that the coasts do. And so when they see someone coming saying, how do we work together to rebuild American prosperity? How do we make sure your kids have the same shot that the kids who go to Fremont High School have? I think they're open to it.
It sounds like what you're saying also cuts across ideological lines. This is not necessarily a Democratic platform issue, and you've kind of cut out a unique space within the party of appealing to perhaps a broader electorate than just the typical tried and true blue Democratic voters. So what talk a little bit about how you've expanded that reach to independents, to Republicans. I mean, there are even themes, some of the parts of what you just mentioned are things that former President Trump talked about at times in his candidacy. Are the Democrats missing an opportunity to kind of sharpen a message like what you're saying? Is there something missing within the party discussion?
Well, you know who talked about it before Donald Trump is Alexander Hamilton and FDR. FDR built the modern economy. By the way, it was women in the factories who helped build and modernize America. And FDR made sure that there was childcare, because how was Rosie the Riveter going to build the industry without the kids there? That was FDR's vision. It's sad to me that we've let Donald Trump take the manufacturing message where we have the real substance. Now, look, it is some message that can bring people together. And to some extent, Trump speaking about the loss of manufacturing jobs is what resonated in parts of the industrial Midwest and the South. But what we need to say is he had 4 years. Where was the manufacturing coming back? We have the actual policies. I led the Chips and Science Act to give funding to technology companies to bring the semiconductor production here. And people get now why we need semiconductors. They didn't have the cars. Their cars were parked on vacant lots or parked on lots without being able to be sold because they didn't have a semiconductor. We have a policy where we can provide the financing to allow industry to build new factories, provide the financing to have the worker training, work with the labor unions so that industry is working with labor, is working with educational institutions to rebuild America. And that's what the National Development Council that I've actually worked with Senator Rubio is all about. So I welcome a broad coalition, but we can't just say, let's bring manufacturing back without having the actual policies to do that.
And I noticed there's also some debate within the party about what media outlets to target or to go on. You seem to be okay with going on conservative channels like Fox News, or just kind of meeting people where they are, and that's interesting for a Democrat and for a progressive too. It's an interesting approach. What goes into that thought process of kind of going out there and talking to people on different sides of the spectrum?
You know, every American politician is fond of citing Abraham Lincoln as one of their models. I was reading John Meacham's book on Lincoln, and there are two takeaways I got from what Lincoln's temperament was. One, he never questioned people's motives, and two, he didn't question their patriotism. He tried to win people over with the substance of his argument. And I just think that if we took that approach to American politics. I try. I'm not always successful, and certainly am nowhere near in the same breath as what Lincoln had. But if we take that approach of not questioning people's motives, of not questioning their patriotism, of recognizing that they represent 700,000 Americans or more, and that you want to win them over by the strength of your argument, I think you make more progress. And that's the approach. People say, how can you be a Bernie Sanders co-chair and go on Fox and have people listen to you? And it's because I don't go on there and just hurl insults.
It brings me to sort of this next point. We also heard in the lead up to the midterms in November that there was a little bit of skepticism among some Democrats for using that label progressive. So like you mentioned, you were Bernie Sanders co-chair in 2020. You're a prominent member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, which is, tried and true progressive. And yet, we saw John Fetterman, for example, win as an economic populist and not call himself a progressive. So that was something in, neighboring Pennsylvania, just down the street from where we are. How do you define yourself?
I'm a progressive. Yeah. I'm a progressive Democrat. I'm proud of being a progressive Democrat. I would say John is a progressive Democrat. I don't know how he defines himself, but here's what progressivism is. Progressivism is economic populism. Progressivism says that every American should have a living wage. Progressivism says that we should make sure that people aren't drowning in medical debt in America, that your health care shouldn't be dependent upon your job, that everyone should have health care in this country, that you should be able to go to vocational school without drowning in debt, that you should be able to get a community college or college degree without drowning in debt, that we should have a renaissance of manufacturing and economic opportunity, and we shouldn't relegate factory towns and rural American communities of color to a second-class economic status. That is the progressive vision. That is the FDR vision. He was the original progressive. And I am proud of that. I'm proud of that. And I believe, by the way, the last progressive Democrat, FDR, won 4 terms. It was a pretty good political strategy.
The 2024 election is likely to be another really close contest. It's going to probably come down to just a couple of states, swing states. Again, these places like we just saw in Wisconsin, a major victory for the Democrats over abortion. Do you see the Democrats making any early mistakes for the lead up to 2024 that you would caution against? There's, as well as anyone, there's a lot of theories about, among strategists, among lawmakers, even folks in the White House, about what should be done in these critical Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia. Any warning signs?
First mistake is underestimating Joe Biden. I have been calling for President Biden to run for re-election before the midterms, before it became conventional wisdom. He's a very talented politician. He understands how to connect with people. His instincts are much better than the 30 or 40-year-olds who work for him and do social media. We need to let President Biden help carry the message of bringing manufacturing back, of helping revitalize the economy, and really trust some of his instincts of having spent so much time in places like Pennsylvania, and not have a firing squad on someone who is going to be our nominee. Now, there are places I, of course, want the president to go further. And I've, as you know, criticized him where I disagree on policy. But he's our quarterback, and we need to rally around him. And the second thing we need to do is make sure we understand that the base of the party, actually the people who want him to run the most for re-election, are young folks. And that we not compromise on climate, we not compromise on trans rights, on gay rights, on abortion rights, on the issues that really young voters care about, that we have a strong, bold position on gun violence. And if we do both of those, then I think we will win.
Has the president sought out your advice, or have you offered it informally or formally to him heading into the cycle?
Why would the president ask my advice for how to win a presidential election? I've got a couple 100,000 votes. He's got millions. That would be highly presumptuous for me to tell the president how to win a presidential election. I can tell him how to win my district, but what I have said to the president is, here are my passion for what I believe in, on what we need to do on manufacturing, on what we need to do to help inspire young folks. But ultimately, I think it would be presumptuous for anyone who's a member of Congress to go tell a sitting president how to win a presidential election.
Going back to just the sort of progressive versus moderate debate and divide that's ongoing. I mean, it's a longstanding thing. Obviously, it's likely to continue into 2024 and beyond. Looking even beyond 2024, there's talk among progressives in particular and members of your own caucus in the House about who might lead the movement that Senator Sanders started. And I take your point about endorsing President Biden for this coming election, but we're also sitting in Iowa, and you're here, and you've made trips to early battleground states, New Hampshire, my home state, South Carolina. Curious, what that's all about, what factors into your own thinking long term.
Well, first of all, I don't think there's going to be one person who's going to inherit Bernie Sanders' movement. The people who will inherit Bernie Sanders' movement are the grassroots activists who helped empower Bernie Sanders. And we're going to have many progressive voices. We've got a whole new generation of talented people: Maxwell Frost, Delia Ramirez, Jonathan Jackson, who are coming into Congress, where the energy is with the Progressive Caucus. But I do hope that in the future, post-Biden, that the party will clearly be for Medicare for all, eliminating medical debt, free vocational education and free public college, a $15 wage, strong support for unions, a bold vision on climate that is going to require, with the Thrive Act, $1 trillion a year spending to rebuild our public infrastructure, our electricity grid, our water infrastructure. That should be our agenda in the future. And why I want President Biden to succeed is because that makes a progressive movement more possible. And I do think that we're going to see, for the next 20 years after President Biden, progressive nominees of the party.
Congressman Ro Khanna, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.